Hey, if you're with us for the first time, my name is Brad, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm continuing us on this morning. We're in a series, a third week in a series on the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're looking at this very unusual book. We're going to be in chapter 4 this morning, but if you've been with us for the past couple of weeks, you know Ecclesiastes is a really, really unusual book. Really unusual. In fact, it offers a very unusual look at life, and it offers a very unusual sort of wisdom or a way of navigating life. And if you were here the first couple of weeks, you know this. I've made a couple of statements about Ecclesiastes, that Ecclesiastes is for everyone who ever played by the rules, and the rules didn't work out for you. Like you didn't get what you thought you would get by playing by the rules. Ecclesiastes is for everyone who ever worked hard to get somewhere, and then when you finally got to that place, like you got to the destination, you realized it was about the journey and not about the destination. Like for any of us that have ever gone, man, I got there, I got this thing, I made it to that place, I achieved this thing, and then we went, this is it? Well, that's what Ecclesiastes is written for. Ecclesiastes is for anyone who's ever had joy and lost it. It's for anyone who's ever had meaning and no longer can find it. It's for anyone who has ever had a deep sense of peace and now there's only discomfort. It's for anyone who's experienced those things, which when you listen to those descriptors, you draw the conclusion that Ecclesiastes is written for who? Everyone, right? Especially us. It's for anyone who's living a very real existence. This isn't some sort of churchy religiosity where you just play by the rules and things turn out the way you want. He's actually showing us something deeper. He's taking us to a level that is actually more meaningful and more purposeful. So in week number 1, if you were here the first week, you know that we talked about chapters 1 and chapters 2, and the writer, the wisdom teacher of Ecclesiastes, he basically put all of the stuff of life in perspective. He puts all of the houses and the cars and the achievements, the degrees, the promotions. He puts the stuff of life in perspective, and he does that by using a single word, and the word was havel, and that word meant what? Vapor, right? It is all vapor. He's saying, listen, it's all vapor. He's not saying it's not important. He's not saying it doesn't matter. You kind of need that stuff to live. But what he's saying is, if you go to vapor to find substance in life, if you go to those things to try to find meaning or joy or peace in your life, you're going to try to grasp something and there's nothing there for you to hold on to. And so he puts all the stuff of life in perspective. And then last week we dove into chapter 3, and in chapter 3, he basically puts time into perspective. So we have stuff and then we have time. And essentially what we talked about last week is this idea that a lot of us can get stuck in our past. And we kind of carry it with us everywhere we go, and we don't forget about it, and we still beat ourselves up over it, and we still wish we would have done things different in our past. And then others of us, we panic and worry about our future. We don't know if there's going to be enough to go around. We don't know what's going to happen in the days ahead. And what the writer of Ecclesiastes presented to us was a third option of living life, not worrying about the past and not fretting about the future, but he presented this idea that you and I might just be present in the moment. He talked about this idea of eternity, a Hebrew word, ha'olam, and he said there is this thing, ha'olam, that is in your heart, and you can experience something beyond this time at any moment in life. He teaches us how to be present. That's what we looked at last week. And so today we're moving into chapter 4, and again, there's another word. There's another word and another example of wisdom that's beyond wisdom. And first it was stuff, and then it was time, and now we're going to move to talking about our posture. How do we posture ourselves as we move through our lives, as we move through our days? And if you have your Bible, I want you to open to Ecclesiastes 4. If you don't have your Bible, the words are going to be on the screen. As we've done so far in this series, I'm going to just read the text, and then I'm going to talk a few minutes about it. It'll be over before you know it. It's not going to be that painful. Some of you are like, I can't stand here very long, or sit here very long. And as you can probably guess, as we read this, there might be a word that's repeated, right? We had havel, we had ha'olam, and in this we might see a word that reoccurs that might be the basis of where we're going. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So Ecclesiastes 4, verse 1, we'll just read to verse 9. It says this. Again, I looked, by the way, get ready for all the encouragement every week. It's so encouraging, Ecclesiastes. Just pumps you full of sunshine, right? He says, again, I looked and I saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. Remember, in the world of the created, under the sun, in the world of the created, there was all this oppression. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is under the sun. And I saw that all the toil and all the achievements that spring from one's envy of another, this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves, but one handful with tranquility is better than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone, and he had no brother or son, and there was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. So we always kind of wonder what's going on, right? And today I want to spend some time looking at verses 5 and 6, because packed in the middle of these 9 verses, in the middle of verses 5 and 6, in the middle of this whole life is tough and don't be really encouraged by this because it's all vapor and it doesn't matter. In the middle of this, there's actually something that's really powerful that he slips in here that brings perspective to the rest of it. Let me just read it again. Verses 5 and 6, he says, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain words in this series, certain words in this book that the author uses repeatedly. There's things he uses over and over again, and usually when he does this, it kind of clues us in that there's something else going on. There's some meaning here. And so you might have noticed this. You might have noticed when you looked at this, the author uses the word hands 3 times in verses 5 and 6, or some form of the word hands, handfuls. So I want to take a hold of this morning, if you will. Yeah, you guys are smarter than the first service. It's good. First service, they just looked at me when I said that, and I was like, oh, wake up. Nice to wake up. But seriously, I want to take a look at the word hands for just a moment. In your English translation, when you look at this on the screen or in your Bible, you just see it's hands, handfuls, handfuls. Hands, it's all the same word, hands, the same thing, right? Here's what's really interesting. When you actually look at this in the Hebrew language, when you look at these sentences in the language that it was originally written in, there are actually 3 different words that we're translating with this one idea of hands or handfuls. And if you spend enough time here at Summit, you know that when that kind of thing happens, we start being the 3-year-old and we go, why, right? Well, why is there 3 different words? Why does he do this? And what does that mean in this? So in order to answer this, I want to do this. I want to look at the last use, and then I want to look at the first use, and then we're going to look at the middle use. So we're going to look at what he says here in the middle of these verses. So we have this phrase at the very end, verse 6. He says, better one hand with tranquility than 2 handfuls with chasing after the wind. So the 2 handfuls, this phrase is actually the Hebrew word kofen. Say that with me. Say kofen. Kofen. Now, kofen literally means like cupped hands, like this. So take your hands real quick and kind of put them together, right? Put them together, but make them real tight, like you're trying to hold something in there, like you caught a lizard, I don't know, something like that, and you're trying to hold it, right? You're trying to capture something. You're trying to make sure it doesn't get away, right? That's this idea. Kofen is this idea of holding this thing in these hands, right? It's holding. It's a gesture. And here's what's interesting about this phrase, this word and this gesture. It actually has symbolism, and it has symbolism because anytime we read about the word hands in the Bible, like what we do with our hands, what you put your hand to, like the plow, anything you do with your hands is representative of your life. It's representative of the power and the energy and the meaning that you have in life. Hands is always sort of a representation of like all that you are. And so we're talking about our hands, and we're talking about a posture that looks like this. And what this word kofen seems to indicate in the Hebrew language is not just simply like trying to hold something, but it's like a grasping. There's a desperation that is underlying this word kofen. It's trying to hold all that it can. It's trying to get all that it can. And so behind this gesture, there's this deep sense like, I can't get enough. Or there's not going to be enough to go around. Like if you grew up with brothers, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's not enough to go around. I got to get more. There's this idea I got to gather, I got to make it all mine, right? I got to do this thing. By the way, that gesture, that idea, that's something that we know, right? We've experienced this. It's the rat race. It's the go, 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 go. It's the achievement after achievement after achievement. It's the climb the corporate ladder. It's the acquire all this stuff. It's the stress. It's all of that think about this. This is the perfect posture to throw some elbows to some people around you, right? Don't do that right now. You'll hurt somebody, but you know what I'm talking about. When you're holding this, you can just kind of muscle your way through life. There's this sense of, I'm going to get mine. That's what kofen means. You imagine somebody who's hiking through the desert and they haven't seen water in days, and they suddenly come to some spring of water. They cup their hands, they grab, they kofen, and there's this desperation, like, there's not going to be enough. I haven't seen it, and I don't know if there's going to be any more. There's this idea of kofen. I'm just drinking as much as I can because I don't know. Will there be enough? Will there be any more? So I'm just going to keep it for myself. That's kofen. That's the last phrase that he uses. That's the last word for hands, kofen. Now let's move to the first word. So the first word, he says, this word is the word yod. Say that with me. Say yod. Now, the word yod means folded hands. So like take your fingers and kind of intertwine them like this. Now, if you got a belly that's big enough, just rest them there. If you're pregnant, you can do this, right, Katie? Right? You just kind of rest them there. You can kind of fold your hands and rest, right? This is yod. So this word, the first word is yod. So some people just yod, right? Now, the wisdom tradition uses this word yod a lot. In fact, it's sort of a euphemism in the wisdom literature that's used all the time. This folding of hands. Now, picture this folding of hands. It's probably a gesture of what? Laziness, right? It's a gesture of laziness, sloth. Sometimes it's translated like the sluggard folds his hands, you know? Just kind of sitting back and relaxing. Let me give you an example. Proverbs 24:33 says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief and scarcity like an armed man. A little folding of the hands, right? And here's what's interesting. Again, think about this. This word yod, because it has to do with the hands, it's representative of what? It's representative of your power. It's your life. It's associated, connected to the meaning, the direction, the gifts, all the resources that make you you. Yod is associated with that, right? And so it carries this meaning. This is a posture of what you're doing with your life. It's like basically you're simply saying this. When you decide to yod, you're saying, God, I know you gave me a life, and I know you gave me energy, and I know you gave me strength, and I know you gave me resources, and I know you gave me a will, and I know you gave me thoughts, and I know you gave me a body. I know you even put me in a time, in space, where I can actually live. You gave me a life to do something with it, and I chose to do this. It's the posture of somebody who chooses, you know what, I know I've been given all that, but I'm just going to disengage. I choose to fold. It's like this epic moment of the soul where you go, you know what? I've seen enough and I've done enough. I think I'm just going to fold my hands and phone it in from here on out. I realize you put me in the middle of this great, beautiful world and I can create things. And I know there's suffering and I can help alleviate that suffering, but I'm just going to yod. I'm going to yod. I'm going to fold my hands. So, we have kofen. We have this desperation, this cupping of the hands. Work. I got to get it all for me. And then the other extreme, we have this yod. You know, I'm just kind of done and I don't really need to do anything. These two extremes. But then in between the two, the teacher gives us a third way. The teacher gives us a third option, which is really interesting because we tend to approach everything as either or, right? There's black and there's white. There's rarely some sort of middle way, except for when you come to the Bible. By the way, this is a general truth. Oftentimes what the Bible is doing, and especially what Jesus is doing, is saying, you know what, you thought it was this and you thought it was that, but I'm going to show you this third thing. So the writer of Ecclesiastes is actually giving us a third thing. There's a third way, and it's this. He says, better is one hand with tranquility. And again, this is a completely distinct Hebrew word. This is the word cough. Say cough with me. Cough. In the first service, someone coughed literally at that moment. But cough. Now, the word cough is just a single open hand. Do this for me. Put your hand out. It's a single open hand. Now, just think about what this represents. And now look at your hand for a moment and do me a favor. Just make a fist and hold the fist. Look at your fist. Think about what that represents. And now open your hand again. There's some symbolism in this, right? If this is a posture of your life, if this is the resources, if this is what you've been given, and you've got this cough posture, you're saying, I'm not holding on, right? I'm still holding, but I'm sort of holding loosely, right? Do you see the difference between these two? An open palm allows you to hold things, but it also allows you to give things away, right? I can receive and I can give. This thing, it's hard to receive. This thing, it's hard to give. But this thing, I can receive and I can give. And yes, it is still some sort of work. I'm still doing something. This is a particular kind of posture. He says, better with one hand with tranquility. Tranquility means rest and peace and calm. It's better to have rest and peace and calm through cough. Cough is where you experience tranquility. This idea of two fists, this idea of two hands grasping and holding, or this idea of folded hands, neither one of those will get you the tranquility you're looking for. He's saying it's found right here. And when we start to understand this, what he's saying is this is a different way to live, a different way to move, a different way to have your being in this world. You can cough. You can live like this. I grew up in a really peculiar place. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. And let me explain one of the peculiarities of this place I grew up. Every October or November, there was this great migration that would happen every single year. And it seemed as if every single person over the age of 60 that lived west of the Mississippi River came to Phoenix, Arizona. That's just what it seemed like. I don't know if it's true or not. Don't check my stats, but I think it was 100% somewhere around there. And so every year, the average age of our population, it just spiked, like went through the roof. And then the moment it hit like 95 degrees, poof, they were gone, and we could all get back to normal life, right? Like everybody would show up, and then like all the buffets were filled, and everybody slowed down their driving, like everything sort of changed, and it's kind of a crazy thing. And then so some genius, and I truly believe this person was a genius who must have lived in Phoenix a few decades back, he decided that all of these people needed a place to be. Like we should corral them and put them in one corner of the city, like out on the west side of the city, kind of away from everybody. And so they made this decision. They built this development. In fact, on the western outskirts back then of the city of Phoenix was this place called Sun City. Sun City, where we can hide all the snowbirds, right? By the way, one of the things I loved about it is golf carts were legal. And so it's like a giant Liberty Lake, basically. Like you just got like crazy old people everywhere driving golf carts, talking to their buddies, and you're like sitting in a car at a light and like barely moving around, you know. It's just... So no offense to those of you that, no offense, I offended about half the service in our 8 a.m. service today, but... Imagine a community where everybody is like the youngest person that can live in Sun City is 55. By the way, I don't know very many 55-year-olds that move there, usually like 65. But the youngest person that can live there is 55. There is no age limit on how old you can be. You can be like 200 and live in Sun City. And that's your demographic, right? That's your demographic. And so this week, in fact, I found a picture this week and I couldn't help but show it to you. Welcome to the original fun city, Sun City, right? Sun City's fun city, am I right? When you come to Sun City, you're going to expect some fun city. That's what you're going to get if you come to Sun City, right? Got people all over the place in golf carts and doing things, having fun. But I remember going there as a kid in high school. I remember I got this job. Around Mother's Day every year, you know, like all of the mothers that were from west of the Mississippi live in Sun City. And so every Mother's Day, the florists get inundated. And so they would hire like seasonal help to deliver flowers. And so I got this job where I would just go, and basically all I did was like fill my car with flowers and then drive around Fun City and deliver flowers to all these moms that were, to be honest with you, they were alone in their houses. Knock on the door and deliver flowers, knock on the door, deliver flowers, knock on the door, deliver flowers. I'd look, it's from their kids, it's from this kid, it's from that kid. That's all I do all day. And the whole weekend around Mother's Day, I just delivered flowers. And let me just tell you something. I've spent enough time in Fun City to tell you, it is not Fun City. I remember being like 16 or 17 years old, and I'm observing what's going on. I'm like, these people are bored. They're bored. Like they folded their hands. Like with all the experience and all the stories and all the richness of their lives, somebody told them somewhere that what you do with all of that richness and all of that knowledge and all of that learning is you just sort of pack it in. You fold your hands and you give up because that's what you do. You just sort of, you yod your way through the rest of your life. Like the highlight of the day is the early bird special at Old Country Buffet. Like that, is that what I'm created for? Like this is it? I'm just going to yod myself away. You can feel it. By the way, don't you notice that? Don't you notice that you can see it in another person when another person has decided, I'm going to just phone it in. I'm just going to fold my hands and be done. You can see that. You can sense it. You sense it in yourself. Like we know when we have come to that place of going, you know what? I'm just done. I'm just going to phone it in. But then what's the other option for us? On the other end of the spectrum, we have this other person, we have this other option that is like afraid we're not going to have enough to ever move to Fun City. And so we're just grasping, right? I mean, think about this. I think about how ironic this is. So we spend the first half of our life just grasping and saving and doing all these things and holding on to and getting enough because someday maybe I can move to Fun City. And so we grasp and we take and we hold and we worry and we stress about all of this different stuff. We become tethered to this corporate machine and we just work and work and work and we're busy, busy, busy. We're doing all of those, always come in threes, by the way. You're always going, right? And there's anxiety and stress and you can't be away from Wi-Fi or a cell tower because you're afraid you're going to miss the email or miss the call. And this thing's going to happen because you just have to grasp and hold on to all of it because you're the one that's in control. So we have cupped hands. Or we have folded hands. Kofen or yad. That's what our culture gives us. So there's checked out and stressed out. And the invitation of the teacher, he says, listen, some fold their hands and some are grasping for all they can. But there's a third way. Better one hand with tranquility. Better one hand with tranquility. I hope that for you think about these options and like me, there's something in your soul that says, I want this, right? You with me? Isn't that what we're looking for, is this tranquility? It's the peace that we've lost. So I want to look at John chapter 14 for a moment. I want to look at a couple of insights from the life of Jesus, just some things that I think speak to this and how we experience this. What does one-handed tranquility look like? How do we experience one-handed tranquility? How do we get there? There's some important stuff that Jesus shows us. What does it look like? John 14, Jesus is talking about what he gives and why he's come. He's basically saying, this is what I give to you. This is what I offer to you. This is what I do. This is what I give. And in verse 27 of John 14, he says this really powerful statement. He says, peace I leave with you. Peace, remember, it's peace. It's this tranquility. Peace I live with you. My peace I give you. But then listen to what he says. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. Peace I give you. Now, we've explored this. We understand this. If you've been at Summit any length of time, you know that when any Jewish rabbi, including the rabbi Jesus, uses the word peace, he's drawing on this ancient, broad understanding that the Hebrews held in their hearts, this thing called shalom. It is this idea of all-encompassing wholeness. It is all of life. Yes, Jesus wants to deal with certain individual broken things in your life. Yes, he wants to heal the stuff that's messed up in your body. Yes, he wants to do those things. But on the larger scale, what Jesus is concerned about is this, he wants us to live with one-handed tranquility. He wants to rescue us from the insanity of normal everyday life. He's saying you're going to get up every day and you're going to go to work and you're going to come home and you're going to feed the kids and you're going to do all this stuff. And in the middle of all the insanity, I want to show you something that's different than what the world's giving you. So and he's saying this, in this passage he's saying, if you seek to become the kind of person who lives with one-handed tranquility, you're going to be swimming upstream. I don't give as the world gives. The world gives you this. The world gives you this. I'm giving you this. And it's different. So we need to understand that. We need to understand it's countercultural. In our world, all we know how to do is fold our hands or grasp for things. But to be a person of one-handed tranquility, you will have to confront those things, those idols, those gods of our culture. You're going to have to actually address and assess and say, am I living with this same set of principles and values that everybody is? I mean, do I abuse my body? Do I have this lack of peace, the lack of rhythm? Do I have the habits of our culture? Or am I doing something that's really, really different? So when we talk about this, we have to be aware that our culture is only going to show us this grasping thing, or it's going to show us this thing, and it's going to tell us peace is found in one of those two. And it's never going to affirm the way of Jesus that's somewhere kind of like that. It's not going to do this. We're going to have to call out some of these impulsive habits that are just things that we have just said, well, that's just normal. It's just normal that you just race and you run and you miss workouts and you don't eat well and you live stressed out and you never sleep at night. And it's just normal. That's just what it takes to live in this culture. Well, it's just normal to just phone it in and take all of your life experience and all the lessons you've learned and all the history you've got and just sort of package it away and don't let anybody glean anything from it. That's just normal. That's just what we do in our culture. It's all about you now. That's what our culture says, and we have to confront that. He says, Jesus says, I've come to open your eyes to this. I want you to see differently. So now I want to turn to a different passage, Matthew chapter 3. He's saying this is different, and now he's going to show us a little bit of how, right? So first of all, this is different, and now how do we get this? In Matthew chapter 3, Jesus is being baptized. John the Baptist has come ahead of him. He's been preparing the way, been telling people, hey, there's this guy that's coming. He's really amazing. You're going to love him. It's called the Messiah. And in John chapter 3, he's going to baptize him. And this is right before Jesus is going to go into the wilderness. After Jesus goes into the wilderness, he starts his public ministry. So this is before any of that stuff happens. And this is what we read, verse 16. It says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. And at that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my Son. This is my Son. And I love him, and I am proud of him, and I am pleased with him. Let me ask you a question. At this point in the story of Jesus, Matthew chapter 3, has Jesus drawn large crowds to hear his teaching yet? Nope. He hasn't, has he? Has Jesus healed anyone? In Matthew chapter 3, has Jesus healed anybody yet? He hasn't, right? He hasn't done that. Has Jesus written a book or spoken at a conference yet? No, hasn't done that. Nobody's named a building after him at this point, not at all, right? Has he had a great Q&A time with some skeptics? Nope, hasn't done that. What has Jesus done up to this point? Matthew chapter 3, what has Jesus done up to this point? Nothing. Nothing of significance. The guy went to school, did really good. That's what we know of Jesus, right? But at this point in the story, he's done nothing of significance. And here's why that's significant. The story opens with him receiving a blessing from his Father before he ever lifted a finger, before he ever did a thing. I mean, this blessing, this validation, this statement like, I love you and I accept you and I'm proud of you. And like that statement comes, it starts with this. So what we see is that God is not holding back until he proves something like, man, you know what? When you get a crowd that's big enough, then I'll give you my blessing. Or when you heal like 14 people, then I'll start paying attention. He's not doing that. He's not waiting to see how he does. He's not waiting to see how he performs. He doesn't wait to see, does he do things the right way? Is everything? No, this is my son, and I love my son, and I'm proud of my son, even though he hasn't lifted a finger yet. So think about this. This is how Jesus starts this whole thing. He starts by receiving this primal blessing. Like deep inside of his soul, he hasn't earned this, deserved it. He literally has just been told, you are loved, you are accepted, you are validated, you are affirmed before you do anything. Which means that everything else that Jesus does, everything that Jesus spends his time doing from that point forward just comes out of this place of validation. It comes out of this place of knowing like you're loved and you're accepted and you're affirmed. Which means that Jesus isn't doing things in order to somehow achieve affirmation. He's not trying to strive to earn God's love. His fundamental beginning place is this place where he is affirmed before he does anything. Do you see the difference this might make in a person's life? Please, somebody. Yes. Do you see this? I mean, imagine if you operate out of a place where you're not striving and earning. I mean, how many of us, we strive and work and earn, and we're like, man, I just want to be good enough. I just want somebody to validate me. How many of us, because of the pain of our lives, we got frustrated and we gave up, so we just folded our hands. Imagine if instead we heard the voice of our Father say, I'm pleased with you, and I love you. You see Jesus, you notice this calm that comes out of his life when you receive this sort of blessing. Like, you hear about the way Jesus talks about his work in light of this whole idea. Like, Jesus just said, like, do you ever hear Jesus say, I'm just trying not to make the Father mad. Like, I have come because I don't want to make God mad. Do you ever hear Jesus say, like, you know what, you guys messed this thing up so much, and now I got to be here, and I got to work extra hours. Like, Jesus doesn't wake up every day and say that stuff, right? He doesn't go, hey, listen, like, I gotta make up for you disciples, you failed, and so today I got to work extra hard. No, he doesn't live with guilt. He doesn't live with shame. He doesn't live with striving. He doesn't live with stress. Jesus lives with this kind of one-handed openness, one-handed tranquility. So you have a life, you have energy, you have a body, and you have space and time, you have a will, you have things that excite you and light you up inside, and you have things that grieve you, and you have things that suck your will to live. You have all of these things. And what we struggle with is what we do with this thing we call our hands, with this thing we call our life. Some of us, it's so terrifying we just fold them. Others of us, we're just striving. And then there's this place. I love this. It's like Jesus just says, I got a few things to do in the world, and I'm doing them. Like John chapter 5, a little later in the 20s of the book of John, there's this, when people ask Jesus what he's up to, he's just like, you know what, this is it. I got a few things to do, and I'm doing them. I got a few things to do, and I'm doing them. It's tranquil. It's peaceful. Does it take work? Yes. One hand is still out there. Does it take energy? Yes, it does. But in the larger perspective, it is in this context, this place of peace and tranquility. So I want you to do me a favor right now. Do something that's not too weird, and it doesn't involve anybody but you, okay? So I just want you to do this. Fold your hands, like put them down in front of you. And I just want you to look at them. Look at your hands right now. Don't look at me. If I catch you looking at me, no, just kidding. Look at your hands. Some of us in this room, this is the posture we've taken in life. Maybe you were burned. Maybe you were disappointed. Maybe somebody let you down. Maybe you jumped into something and it didn't work out, and there's something inside of you that says, you know what, my survival mechanism is just fold my hands. I'm going to yod my way through the rest of life. Or maybe you've been told that you don't have what it takes. You're not approved. You're not affirmed. You don't know that you're loved. And so you just kind of live in this place of insecurity, and so you just yod. You just fold your hands. Or maybe somebody gave you the script to this American life, and you've just been living it, and so you're like, well, I guess in this chapter I yod. I guess I just fold my hands. Whatever the case is, just look at your hands and imagine what would change if you just heard right now in this moment, this is my daughter, and this is my son, and man, I'm pleased with you, and I love you, and I made you, and I gave you a life. What would change? Now do me another favor, make the cup. Make that cup of striving. Is there anybody in the room other than me who this represents? Because I'm going to tell you, this represents me right now in my life. Look at that cup. Maybe you're striving and you're stressing and you're working. Why? Why? Maybe you use the word busy way too much. Maybe you have a really long list of things you're going to get to when life slows down. Maybe you're worried that there's not going to be enough to go around. Maybe you're not eating right. Maybe you quit exercising. Maybe you're not taking care of yourself. As you look at your hands in that position, I want you to notice something. Do you notice how easy it would be for me to handcuff you right now? Guys, this is a prison. This striving, it's a prison. And as you look at your hands, I want you to imagine what would change if you just heard the voice of your Heavenly Father say, you're my daughter, you're my son, and before you ever get out of bed in the morning, before you ever make the coffee and start your hectic day, I'm pleased with you, and I love you, and I'm proud of you. Think maybe you drop a hand. See, this is what Jesus is inviting us into. Jesus invites us into some very straightforward questions about what we're gripping tightly for, why we folded our hands. He leads us to this. And the Holy Spirit of God, I believe, helps us confront this insanity that is our life, right? So do me one more favor. I want you to put one hand out, and I want you to stand with me. Just stand with me with one hand out. And I just want you to take a nice deep breath. So put your hand out there, look at your hand, and take a deep breath. Let your other hand kind of hang by its side because that hand is free, right? He's pleased. He's pleased with you. You are his daughter. You are his son. And he is pleased. And you don't have to grasp. And you don't need to fold your hands. You can live with this open-handed tranquility. That is the story of the gospel. You can live like this. So may you be men and women who live with one-handed tranquility. Amen? Amen. Love you guys so much. Thanks for being here. You guys have an amazing day. If you want to pray with somebody, there's folks down front, and we will see you guys next Sunday for Ecclesiastes chapter 5.